All right, so we are on chapter 20, which is the final chapter for this semester. So just we got one more, and then we review, and then it's exam time, and then it's a break, much deserved break. Okay, so chapter 20, the first part we're talking about is politics. Expansion will be the last part. Okay, so just note there's some terms we'll go over and we're going to fill them in, like maybe at the end of every day, think, okay, what were things we talked about, kind of thing. Okay, so during the Gilded Age, we're talking, the 1870s or the 1890s. Some historians refer to it as the politics of equilibrium. You will see that the platform for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are almost identical except for two things, okay? So there's not going to be much change. There's not going to be much like taking chances or having a stance on something. It's more about just getting people to vote for your party. It's more about party loyalty than actually having substance in your platform, okay? So a lot of historians talk about how the Gilded Age politics will be very kind of inactive, okay? And this era is kind of known as the era of your forgettable presidents, your Hayes, your Garfield, your Chester Arthur, your Grover Cleveland, your Benjamin Harrison, the forgettable presidents. And I probably forgot one. And also want to point out, none of these presidents I just mentioned actually served consecutive terms. Okay, so you see, it's like one party wins and another party wins and one party wins. And again, it's more about party loyalty than actually having this platform. Okay. And again, you can see this stalemate, just like the elections of 1876 through 1892. This is how people are voting. Again, it's more about who you are, which region you're from, that kind of thing, instead of what the topics of the platform are about, because really, for the most part, they're identical, except for two things. And we'll get to that in a second. Okay, and again, this is just talking about how there's this balance between the Democrats and the Republicans. They're almost identical. Okay, again, a huge reason for like a voter turnout and all that kind of stuff will be loyalty to the two major political parties. Think about it. When you only have like two rivals, you know what I'm saying? Like one person versus one person, it's going to make the rivalry even more. And so you better show up to vote so the other person doesn't win, kind of thing. Okay. So again, it's all about voter loyalty and who you are and which party you identified with, and not really about the substance of the platform. Okay, so let's talk about some voting blocks. So for the Democratic, so if you're a Democrat, here are the people. You tend to be the white Southerners. Just note that Democrats, when there were elections after 1877, so after the troops left the South, the solid South returned. Think about the redeeming South, like all those will be Democrats. Democrats, the whites, Southerners are going to be Democrats. Okay. Catholics tended to be Democrats. Think about like the cities. Catholics, tend to, not to support temperance. Okay. And so they will definitely be part of the Democratic Party. Recent immigrants, like Jews, tend to be part of the Democratic Party. Urban working poor. So people who were like labor unions, people who lived in the cities tended to be Democrats. And most farmers, again, think labor. Okay. Republicans, your northern whites who are, very pro-business. African Americans, why? I think this one makes a lot of sense. Remember the radical Republicans who really pushed for the 13th, the 14th, 15th Amendments, the Freedmen's Bureau, all that kind of stuff. The African Americans know that, and so they're going to support the Republican Party. Northern Protestants, a lot of Northern Protestants would support temperance. Okay. And then your WASP, that's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. A lot of nativists tended to be Republican. And most of the middle class will be Republican. So you see, it's more about who you are than what your party believes in. Okay. Also, another reason why there's a lot of equilibrium here is that it's going to be very, very laissez-faire. Republicans and Democrats. Okay. They both kind of believed in a hands-off approach with the power and the role of the federal government. They kind of believe in social Darwinism, the natural market, and all that kind of stuff. The strongest will survive. We don't need the government trying to interfere and regulate. And even the federal courts, the Supreme Court and all that, they tend to interpret the Constitution just narrowly enough to give the federal government just a little bit of power to regulate stuff. So remember I told you, like, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, like, it was really weak. Like, again, it's like, we're going to regulate, but just a little bit. Okay. So there's that. And again, I told you that the government's not going to do much at all during the Gilded Age, the federal government. Okay. So, their main duty is deliver the mail, maintain a national military just in case, collect federal taxes and tariffs. Income taxes don't exist yet. Okay. Federally. The main revenue maker for the federal government will be tariffs at this time, and then conduct foreign policy. Okay. And then there will be a Civil War veterans pension, think retirement, that they are in charge of, distributing those checks. Okay. So it's more about the president just being like a symbolic figurehead. Party bosses will rule. And remember, Tammany Hall is just one example. They were all over. Remember how, like, Democrats tend to kind of rule the cities, while at the state level, Republicans tended to kind of have a lot of power. So you see, it kind of evens out. Again, presidents should avoid really trying to stir the pot within their party. Okay. And really, the president's job is to dole out federal jobs. The reason why party loyalty was super, super, super important. Remember the spoils system? That's also called the patronage system. This is huge in the Gilded Age. Okay. And basically, it's like, you want your party to win. So you better vote Republican or you better vote Democrat, because if your party wins, that president gets to dole out jobs to that party, those party supporters. Okay. All right, so we have the election of 1868. This is the election of Grant. His slogan was "Let us have peace," meaning like he's the hero of Appomattox kind of thing. He will win. The Republicans will wave the bloody shirt, meaning don't vote for the Democrats. They started the Civil War, and it will be a very, very close election for the popular vote. And who played a big role? Those African Americans, who some states allowed them to vote, those male African Americans. And that's kind of what pushed him over. So Republicans realized the importance of the African American vote here. Okay. Grant, remember, he was a military hero, had no political experience, but we think of Grantism with corruption. There's the Credit Mobile, that fake construction company for the railroad. You also had the whiskey ring. Those are two examples of that Grantism. At the same time, locally, think context, Tammany Hall's big in New York City. Okay. He won pretty big in 1872, that election. And right after that, he will give thousands of pardons to Confederate soldiers and leaders. He's also the president during the start of the Panic of 1873. And this cartoon right here, it says government cake. It's kind of like, you get a pardon and you get a pardon and you get a pardon. Next, we have the election of 1872. This is Grant's second term. There'll be a faction of Republicans called the Liberal Republicans, and they do not like Grant and all the Grantism and the corruption. And they're basically protesting, and they're like, look, we do not want to support Grant. He is corrupt, and he's making the Republicans look bad. So we're pointing out we're not like him. And they will run Horace Greeley. Remember the Go West young man stuff? Okay. And they run him. And interesting fact, though, I mean, Grant wins heavily. He wins. Back then it's like, November you do the popular vote, and then December is when you officially cast the electoral vote. Greeley died before the electoral vote actually was casted. So that, I guess, makes it easy for the Electoral College. Remember, you had the Panic of 1873, which main thing is over speculation in the railroad industry. There's also the Coinage Act of 1873, which will demonetize silver. Y'all know they were getting more gold and more silver discoveries during this time. And the federal government's going to say, we're not going to have coinage in silver. And a lot of people are going to be upset about that, especially poor people, because they prefer silver over gold. Okay, we know that Jay Cook's company will go bankrupt, and this is going to lead to the Panic of 1873. Look at this cartoon when you think of the Panic of 1873. Unemployment, 14%. That is crazy. Not as crazy high as the Great Depression, but about half of that. That's pretty crazy still, though. So we have the election of 1876. Y'all know about this, that disputed election where there's 20 disputed votes. And as a result, there's that electoral commission that will vote to declare Hayes the winner. And this is called that Compromise of 1877, which says that Hayes will be the president if he removes the troops from the South. When the troops leave, that allows those redeemers to get back to power. Okay. And it has a couple other things he has to do too. But again, because of the Compromise 1877, the troops leave, and then the redeemers get back in charge. That solid South of like white supremacy is getting back. You have Plessy versus Ferguson, which is a court case that says you can separate the races as long as the facilities are equal. And that's what we call our Jim Crow laws. And we'll go more detail there. But again, in 1896, this Supreme Court case basically said you can have segregation. You can have Jim Crow laws that are separate. As long as they're equal. And then we know that, especially the redeeming governments, they will really try to, deprive African-American males of their right to vote through literacy tests, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses. So just a big thing early on in the Gilded Age is patronage and civil service reform. Patronage is the same thing, or patronage is the same thing as spoil system. Remember Jackson, where you hire people for federal jobs who are loyal to you. And at first it was 10% of federal jobs when Jackson started doing that. Okay. So there's going to be two Republican factions inside of the Republican Party. One's going to be called the Stalwarts. And how I remember this is like stalwarts means steadfast, but like stalwarts spoil system, S&S. Okay. They want the spoil system. They love political machines. Okay. Roscoe Conkling is the leader of the Stalwarts, very notorious. Then you have the half-breeds, which is a Republican faction that wants civil service reform. They're led by James G. Blaine from Maine. They're both like senators, congressmen, okay? And they support civil service. So again, during this time, if you like the spoil system, and you're a Republican, you're a stalwart. If you don't like the spoil system and you believe jobs should be earned by merit, not doled out, but earned by merit, your credentials, then you're a half-breed. So there's going to be a little tension going on between the Republicans. Okay, so we have Rutherford B. Hayes. Okay, and let me pause right there, see if we need to fill in some stuff. Okay, contested political visions. Okay, really, they're both Republicans and Democrats. Let's first start with what they had in common. Social Darwinism, they liked that. They also laissez-faire, very hands-off. That's really what they had in common. A lot of things. Okay, the two different things. Republicans tend to promote, think your Whigs, think Hamilton even. Republicans want high tariffs. Republicans also want temperance. So flip it. That means Democrats want lower tariffs or low tariffs. And they also do not want temperance. I'd make sure you know Republicans, African Americans tend to support those, while immigrants would tend to support the Democrats. That's really all you have to have in this little section right here. So if you need to pause for a second and take that down, go for it. Okay. The Democrats ruled the South. Remember, that's called the solid South, the South. And then northern cities with large immigration populations, think like New York City. The white Democratic Party elite in the South viewed Republicans as villains who had devastated their lands. Think of it as like, the carpetbaggers came down here and set up all these things we didn't want. So it's carpetbag governments. Okay. Letter B, Democrats campaigned for minimal government expenditures, meaning government spending, very small amounts of government spending. Democrats they opposed tariff increases. And they generally attacked what they consider to be government interference in the economy. They will defend the immigrants. And they will oppose prohibition/temperance. So again, Democrats, Republicans, almost identical, except who were Democrats and Republicans. And Republicans like high tariffs and want temperance. Democrats don't want tariffs and don't want temperance. Okay. Now, Republicans reigned in small rural areas, usually in the upper Midwest. There's a group called the Grand Army of the Republic. The Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR. This is what you call your veterans of the Union Army during the Civil War. They've paid their dues and they deserve a pension for their service. They tend to be Republicans. Many Protestant churches will vote Republican. Some immigrant support, like your more British-born, like Protestants and Norwegians, and then African-American support. That's what I think is more important. Okay, so again, party differences blurred during this period with loyalties determined by your region, religious, ethnic differences. Voter turnout for presidential elections averaged over 78% for eligible voters. That's unheard of. But again, you're going to vote because you identify with the group because of who you are, not what you believe in. Both parties are going to be pro-business. Think laissez-faire. Okay. Let's go to number 6. Federal government and to some extent state governments did very little. 7, Republicans dominated the Senate. Democrats dominated the House. Republican parties are going to splinter. I already told you this. You have the stalwarts who want the spoils system. You have the half-breeds who want to get rid of that and do civil service and, have merit to, have credentials. And then Mugwumps is another group. We'll talk about that later. So let's talk about the Hayes presidency. Not much there. He declared early on he was only going to serve one term. So he became a lame duck. That's a legal term, a lame duck early on. Like, okay, this guy is not running again, so who are we going to focus on now? Okay. And again, review of the election. It's Tilden versus Hayes. Tilden won the popular vote. Electoral Commission to determine electoral results. Compromise 1877. Commission bargained with the Democrats. Character, he was very virtuous. He really tried to contrast himself from the former president Grant and all that Grantism. Okay, he was a big temperance supporter. His wife's nickname was Lemonade Lucy. She was part of the WCTU, and she actually refused to have alcohol served in the executive mansion or the White House. Instead, served lemonade, hence Lemonade Lucy. Okay. Labor problems. He was the one who called out federal troops to put down that great railroad strike of 1877. And he really wanted to promote civil service reform where you earn jobs, not get, handed jobs to you. So that means he's anti-spoil system, anti-patronage or patronage. And again, the stalwarts, Roscoe Conkling's the leader of the stalwarts. They want the spoil systems to remain intact. The half-breeds will be led by James G. Blaine, B-L-A-I-N-E, from Maine. Okay. Now let's see. All right. Here's the election of 1880. You can see almost an 80% voter turnout. James A. Garfield will win. Okay. He really wants civil service reform. And honestly, don't even worry about this chart if there is a chart. Okay, James Garfield wins. He really wants to promote civil service reform. That's all you really need to know because, and he does, he really wants to promote African-American rights, but a lot of things will change because July 2nd, 1881, he will be assassinated. It's kind of an interesting thing. So, he wants civil service reform, but at that time, with the spoil system is in charge. And so thousands of people could go to the White House every day during the weekdays and meet with the president and say, look, I supported you. I really want a federal job. Here's the job I want. Da, da, da. And then if he liked you, he could just give you a thing. Well, there's a guy named Charles Guiteau. And he believed he was supposed to be some diplomat for another country. He needed to be appointed, though, by the president for this. And he was one of those, creepers who, went to the White House every single day to where Garfield and other people beneath him were kind of creeped out by this guy. And so, he thinks, Guiteau thinks he's about to be president. Like, he's going to be president one day. He has to start with this diplomacy position. And who is standing in the way of him? Garfield, because for some reason, Garfield, I mean, he's visited every day and Garfield hasn't appointed him for something. So he will take matters into his own hands. On July 2nd, 1881, at a train station in Washington, D.C., Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker, goes and shoots Garfield at the train station. Okay. And when he shoots him, he says, "I am a stalwart, think spoil system. Arthur is president now." Because here's the thing, Chester Arthur was a big stalwart. Chester Arthur was Garfield's VP. So again, Garfield's more of civil service. His VP, Chester Arthur, was all about being stalwarts and patronage and stuff. And Guiteau is so willing to get a job. He says, "Look, Arthur, I'm a stalwart and I really want to be loyal. So I just tried to kill this guy so you can become president." Okay. He will die. James Garfield will die 11 weeks later from infection. They could not find the bullet. They actually had Alexander Graham Bell, remember, telephone guy. He also created this like magnetic device to try to locate the bullet. And it's like people were with their bare fingers trying to get the bullet out. That's what he died of. So it's kind of interesting, the Alexander Graham Bell part there. So then Chester Arthur will assume the presidency. And remember, he's a stalwart, but now Chester Arthur basically was like, the spoil system is basically what killed Garfield. And, you know, Guiteau wanted the president to appoint him. And basically it's like, I don't want to be Guiteau'd. You know what I'm saying? Part two. So what he does is he will sign in, even though he's a stalwart, he does not want civil service. Because of this situation, Congress will pass the Pendleton Civil Service Act, and he will sign it into law instead of vetoing it. So he's going to piss off the stalwarts, but it's about his safety. He also is the president when the Chinese Exclusion Act is passed, so he signs it into law. Okay, so let's talk about civil service reform. There's a lot of corruption and stuff, and Garfield's assassination, I think, is the icing on the cake to like, let's get rid of the spoil system. Okay, and so Congress will pass the Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883. Make sure you know that. The Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883. Okay, this will establish the United States Civil Service Commission. It's still around today. This is where federal employees will earn through credentials and civil service exams. You have to take an exam to see what kind of job and how high up you can get. So that's really going to, you know, try to get rid of some corruption. Okay, so people will refer to this as the Magna Carta of civil service reform because it got rid of the spoil system. Okay, 1883, 14,000 out of 117,000 government jobs became civil service positions. It's a step in the right direction to try to get rid of some corruption. Okay, 1900, 100,000 out of 200,000 will be civil service jobs. Okay, so but remember, Chester Arthur is going to piss off the stalwarts, and they're not going to run him for the next election because of that. So again, Pendleton it's a stalwart, friend of Conkling. He will support civil service because of the whole assassination thing. He doesn't want to get Guiteau'd. Pendleton Civil Service Act, it's called the merit system. Okay. And, you know, Guiteau will be, like he uses the insanity, reason for what he did and all that kind of stuff. And I believe his brain is like, it's like in a jar somewhere to study because he definitely had some mental unstableness. And you can like see the differences between his brain and other people's brains. It's kind of interesting. Okay. But yeah, so long story short, Garfield's assassination leads to civil service reform. And that's it for the week. Have a good weekend and great job this week.